Pushing now, which is putting us live. So are we live?
Yeah.
So welcome, world, to our first workshop in the office in 2 years. So we are doing something new in that we're doing live in person, although very socially distanced, but also streaming it on the internet at the same time. So if we get a failure on the internet, I apologize in advance, and we will use the recording to place there later. And so we'll come back to that. So, whew. So just talking about how this person might need a little bit more help than a little help to bounce back from the holidays. But aren't the holidays kind of crazy, just in general? I mean, I don't know about you. There was 1 year in our family that the oven in my folks' house broke. So my stepmom literally had food in like 2, 3 other of the neighbors' kitchens. And we're constantly running back and forth and checking this and checking that and bringing it back here and swapping it. It was crazy. Anybody ever have a crazy holiday meal or gathering? Just a few? Yeah. And so, and then of course, with our current climate, right, adding, this COVID condition, right, that adds just a whole other dimension of stuff, right? So they're just crazy in general. We have now extra craziness with COVID. And so a lot of people are just dealing with a lot of different stresses. And so I'm human just like you are. We deal with the same kind of struggles. And so this is really about just kind of regrounding, getting back on track, getting an opportunity to really just reset, if you will, and just kind of see where we're going to go. A lot of times this holiday season, people kind of start hitting that red zone in their overall life. And it's weird to be talking about Christmas and holidays just in general being towards the end of January. But really, it was just, 4 weeks or a month ago today. It hasn't been that long. 3 weeks since New Year's. And so when you start putting it in perspective, it's like, man, the year's just going by quickly. But if we rewind just a little bit and realize how much stress that we may have been under then, well, thank God we're past it. But how do we recover from that? And where do we go from here? I'm going to skip that. So one of the things that we tend to find as we go through the holidays is that the stress levels that we're under start to cause an impact on our overall life. What we're finding when we do some research, this is looking at the daily cardiac deaths from 1973 to 2001. I wasn't able to find anything current. But the nice thing about using heart disease, that's the #1 cause of death in the United States today. And obviously with COVID, that throws a complicating factor. But where are we seeing the worst days of stress? Christmas and New Year's, right? So we take all of our normal life, we add the extra stress of the holidays, and we're seeing it has a huge impact on us, right? Now, do you think that's because at the holiday season, all the doctors are on vacation? Or maybe we have a lack of medication during those days? No, so it has to be kind of our own personal body and our personal lifestyle. And so we have some control over this, right? And so obviously we can't go back to the last year and unwind some of these things. But as we start here now in January 2022, and we start looking forward now to the rest of the year and beyond, we can start making some simple choices that can make some really cool things. There's really, to me though, 3 key things that set us up for this. #1 is that people really have stopped taking personal responsibility for health. It's their parents' fault. It's bad luck. It's bad genes. And so we tend to not take responsibility for the fact that most of our meals come from a drive-through window, right? Or our form of exercise is running to the bathroom during the commercials, right? So you get the idea that we have to take responsibility for ourselves and understand what's going on. But when we take a step backwards and we look at what we end up dealing with once we get out of the holidays, we start expressing all these different symptoms, right? This may not be you, but you know someone, right? They come in, they're exhausted. They get that cold and flu thing, which we now also then add the COVID side of that. So now we have a third thing that we're kind of worrying about with that. Headaches, digestion. The average person gains 1 to 2 pounds every holiday season that they don't get rid of. So they actually gain about 5 pounds, but keep 1 to 2 every year. So if we start adding, maybe we just imagine being 25 and then continuing to do that for the next 25 years. We're not heading in a good path, right? And here's the thing that's interesting. The CDC came out just a few weeks ago and said that 75% of people that have died of COVID had 4 different comorbidities. 4, heart disease, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, the list goes on, right? And so when we start dealing with the stress that we're putting ourselves over the holidays, adding more issues on top of that, we're kind of setting ourselves up for a big problem, right? Now, we're going to start changing the terminology we use in the office from symptoms to really body signals. Because we can have issues in the body that lets us know that there's a problem, like the smoke detector going off, but that's not always the problem, right? And so it can be a signal that something's not right, but there's oftentimes a deeper, more underlying issue. Think of the iceberg that we have here in the wall, right? Most icebergs have the majority of their mass underneath the surface of the water. So if we were to go around the top of it, right, who knows what's going on underneath, right? Think Titanic. And so what we tend to do in our society, we just go, well, I'm just going to make that little signal go away. And how do we do that? You can participate, it's okay.
Painkillers.
Right? Medications. We tend to mask the symptoms that exist there. And so that's not a good long-term scenario as far as helping find the underlying cause and restoring that. And so when we talk about body signals, we want to understand that if we get a body signal, that there's probably a bigger issue going on. Now, obviously, we want to help you live a life that doesn't have those in the first place, so this whole issue doesn't exist. But we want to start baby steps. I always like to preface what we say here in the office and let people realize that if you go home and you implement everything that we're going to talk about, you'll get burnt out or stressed with pulling your hair out within a little bit of a week. And so as you sit back and you listen to what we're talking about, pick 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you and your family can implement to start making some simple changes. A cool way to look at this now is maybe looking at our wellness paradigm, or really kind of the health continuum. So if you look at the left-hand side, right, I mean, basically we're talking death, right? If we look at the far right-hand side, the ultimate goal here is how well can we be living our normal, healthy, everyday life? And so obviously, most people spend most of their life kind of focusing on this end based on the current health culture, right? So we get some sort of a sign like, gosh, every time I sit down on my phone, things aren't working right. Or now I've got ongoing headaches. Or maybe I can't get around and move around a lot. And our common theme, or the common way that we treat that, is, again, drugs, surgery. And again, they have a definite place in our culture as far as being able to deal with a life crisis issue. But once the crisis is over, we need to now start moving, taking responsibility for our health. And what can we start doing different to allow ourselves to be healthier and decrease our risk for some of the chronic health issues? Not just because we want to fight COVID, but because we want to look at really the big picture just in general, right? 1 out of 2 people are going to die of heart disease. 1 out of 3 people, 1 out of 3 women, 1 out of 2 men will have cancer in their lifetime. And so we're trying to help change the story moving forward, because we don't want you to be that one, we want you to be the other one that doesn't get these things. We'd like you to be that person that dies of old age, whatever that is, right? We don't hear about that much anymore, right? It's always they have this condition or this diagnosis. But let's try to live that long, healthy life as much as possible. So we can see we have this neutral point, right? So this is where most people just kind of live. Like, I feel okay, I don't feel okay. I guess it's the other way around. I feel okay, I don't feel okay, right? Sticking with the theme here. But what we really want to do is get our bodies to the point where we're actually really maximizing our health and really being as functional as possible. And this has a role that you guys play. I would love to just bonk you on the head, give you a couple little things to read, and everything just goes well, but it just doesn't work that way. We tend to lifestyle ourselves into sickness, which means we then need to take responsibility to really lifestyle ourselves into health. And that's really where you want to go. I mentioned that our first problem that people have as far as sickness is the lack of responsibility. The second issue is really maybe not having a good definition of what health is in the first place. So when we talk about health, we really look at 5 key areas. Number 1, your body is designed to be healthy. Being healthy is normal. Having a symptom is really just more, again, an alarm that something's not right. So Health is a normal thing, and your body is smart, right? It grows your hair, it makes your muscles move, it helps your lungs breathe, and replaces the skin on your feet, right? All that happens without you having to think about it. There's an innate intelligence and wisdom that every one of us have that needs to express and be expressed to be able to have health. But we have to understand that it's the master system, right? And the nervous system controls literally every single function of the entire body. Immune system, digestive system, everything. And your spine and spinal cord is that suit of armor that protects and houses that. So think of our skull as that helmet over the brain. And we've got the spinal column, the vertebra, that allow movement and flexibility along the spine. In fact, your spinal posture is kind of a window into the function of your nervous system. So the more out of balance your spine is, the more stress is going to be on the nervous system. The more stress on the nervous system, the more dis-ease that the body can have and experience. Anybody disagree with this one, that our modern life is a bit stressful? And has it stress gotten better or worse in the last couple of years? Worse, right? And does it look like it's getting better anytime soon?
No.
Right. So we then have to take some choices on our own selves. What can we do different? So we find that there are three key sources of stress. And I'm not talking about social media and the news, right? But just for our own body, what we experience, there are thoughts, toxins, and traumas. So these are what we call the 3 T's. And they affect many different areas of our body. And so we're going to take these one by one and just kind of identify what they are, and then give you some tools about how we can get over those. So, thoughts. I do a lot of workshops when we talk about mindset. And one of the things I'll often say is that if I talk to you the way that you talk to yourself, you'd hate me. Let me say that again. If I talk to you the way that you talk to yourself, you'd hate me. Now, I believe that we're supposed to love our brother and sister as ourselves. Now, that's not an egocentric way. It's okay to love ourselves and take care of ourselves. But if we don't take care of ourselves, how good are we taking care of someone else? You know what I'm saying? So it's okay to put yourself in a position to be healthy and to monitor and be monitoring and taking care of your stress. And really, there are 4 key areas that our body really manages, or in our life in general, that are important for us to kind of take a look at. So we have a limited amount of time, we have a limited amount of energy, limited amount of money, and a little bit of focus and time. And so how we spend that, if you will, determines how our body deals with the stresses in our life. We all know people that have too much money at the end of their money. That creates a bit of stress. Or maybe their energy comes from energy drinks or drive-through windows versus making food and eating healthier options. Now again, not everybody can do these things, right? But where are you now? And what's a simple step we can go for? One of the things I always have to remind people is that every single person in the world has the exact same 24 hours in a day. Now understand, we have different opportunities and resources in different parts of the world, right? But if we just consider, for example, our area, right? You know, the same 24 hours. We have access to some of the similar resources to some degree or another, right? And then our ability to focus on what we're doing. All is similar for every one of us. But when any one or all of these or more of these get stressed or create stress in our minds, that then reflects into our body and we start having health issues as well. Here's some of the stress responses that we see. Come on. So when we get a stress response, our blood pressure starts to rise. So let's imagine that you're walking down the street, you don't realize that you're stepped in the traffic, and all of a sudden a car honks and the bus is coming at you. You freak out, right? So automatically your blood pressure is going to go up. Your heart rate's going to raise. Your muscles are going to tense. Your digestion is going to have to stop. It kind of starts to change because it doesn't want to focus the energy on digesting, because right now it's running from a tiger, in this case the bus, right? So it's a normal response. Our body is designed to do this, but as it happens, our serotonin levels start to drop. Our our alertness starts to change at that moment, right? Our anxiety and our fear increases. And here's what's interesting. Our immune response actually decreases. Immune response is more of a long-term healing. So if we're in the process right now of running from a tiger, right, fighting cold or flu right now is not the biggest issue right now. Running and having all of our energy focused, that is the key thing. Our insulin sensitivity decreases. We have more blood sugar in the body. Think inflammation, right? We have a change in the good cholesterol and the bad cholesterol. Our sex drive changes. Our clotting factors change. And this is a normal physiological response. Now, in the case of the bus, right, within a short period of time, we should start to be able to normalize. How many of you know people that live their whole life in a state of a stress response? Right? We see patients, and I'm not picking on any of you here, right? You know who you are. But I mean, we all have this at moments in time, but if we keep having this going on day after day after day, week after week after week, well, you get the idea, right? It's not helping us be healthy. And so we have to understand what's causing us to stress in the first place, and then how do we deal with it? Because we talked about stress just a moment ago, right? Stress of the holidays is setting us up for the heart disease. So we obviously have a clear example of how the stress can affect the body, right? July, August, right? Not as stressful. It's December, late December, January, right? So we make different choices in the summertime when we're out and about than we do in the wintertime when we're stuck inside, right? It's about choices. So let's talk about some do's and don'ts. There's some things that we need to just outright stop doing. There's some things that we need to maybe back off or slow down doing. And there's some things maybe we need to start doing, right? And as I mentioned before, don't try to do all this at once. Pick 2 or 3 things max and just start working on that. And we're going to start doing these body signal workshops, Lord willing, on a monthly basis. And so our primary topic for next month is going to be on immunity and how to become just stronger from an immune standpoint, which I think is pretty timely. One, because we're in tail end of winter at that point. But 2, you may have heard about this thing that we're dealing with in the news, right? The COVID thing. So we're going to talk about some things that we can do on a day-to-day basis. So let's think about mindset. So first off, we get to choose our response to the things that happen around us. Right? It's crazy the different things that I see posted on Facebook or on the news when I surf the web for whatever reason, right? So I saw a video of a gentleman throwing a smoothie at a young worker today in a shop. It's like, I can understand where he's coming from based on hearing more of the story about his son, but that's not an excuse to be able to be rude to the other individual, right? So there's the situation, and there's how we respond to it. Now, sometimes it takes a lot of personal grace to be able to offer that to other people, right? But we still get to choose how we respond. And so the better connection we have, the better we interact with other people, can have a big influence on our mindset and how we think. One of the things that's been crazy these last 2 years is that it's amazing how many people come into our office that they may not get touched by another individual other than when we're adjusting them on a weekly basis. Which is sad. We need human connection. Some say that we need to have 10 hugs a day. And so we want to make sure that as we can, to the best of our ability, have that with other people. And then obviously offer unconditional, which I would say that this last 2 items here are probably harder than the first 3. But this is where we really need to kind of live. The other thing we need to work on is sleeping. We tend not to sleep real well. How many of you sleep really good when you have more stress in your life? Right. So do you think we sleep better or worse in the holiday season? Worse. So we're not eating really well. We're not getting enough sleep to recharge. We're under enormous amount. You see where I'm going with it, right? And you ever wonder why people tend to get sicker in January and February? Is they just completely depleted all of the resources and reserves in all those categories we just talked about. And they start living on fumes, and you have 1 or 2 more things and it just pushes you over the edge. So sleep, early to bed, early to rise. Eat fast, what's that?
Oh, is it not looking at a screen for
Electronic
like 2 hours?
fast. So spending less time in front of your computer, or honestly, our handheld computers, we call those smartphones. You're all laughing. It's like, oh, not me, right? It's almost like we wish we had a third arm that could just hold it here, right? But walk through any mall, right? And everyone's on their phones like this. I've literally had patients sitting in my office side by side, texting each other. It's like, come on, people. Just turn and say, have a conversation with them. So, take naps. People always laugh when I say that. You know what? I try to take a nap almost every day. Now, it might be 11 minutes, it might be 15 minutes, 20 minutes max. You don't really need a lot, but it just re-energizes, recharges the body. It's amazing how much more productive you can be in the afternoon moving forward. This is a big one. Don't overcommit. Now, we're past the holidays, so people have already done that. We've already experienced what that's like, right? Every party, every event, every family gathering, we go to all of them, and then we go home and wonder why we're so exhausted and tired, right? So we have to be able to have clear expectations of what we're after. So as we're now moving into the new year, we have to also be careful, too, that we make sure we have time to recover as we're increasing our exercise, or that we have clear expectations about what our nutrition is going to be like. So that's our next thing, right? So looking at things that come into our body that aren't food. Now, I'm going to primarily focus on food for this discussion here, but understand toxins can come from many different ways. Remember the fires that we had in the area? 4 times in the last, 5, 6 years? So all that air pollution, right, that's a toxin. Solvents and chemicals you might use as cleaners around your yard are toxins to the body. Herbicides and pesticides, those get absorbed in the body, whether it's from our foods or from our environment. And so you have to be aware of that. Personal care products, shampoo, makeup, deodorant, shaving cream, all those things have chemicals in them many times that our body then has absorbed into itself. And so we have to be aware of that. So as we start talking about food then, some of the simple basic things is we need to be careful about not going to the grocery store hungry. The battle of the waistline is fought in the grocery store, right? So if you go to the grocery store, one, having eaten or not being hungry, and you have a plan, it's amazing what ends up happening to your nutrition. Think about it. If you don't have ice cream at home, and you get that little hunger or hankering for a bowl of ice cream, if it's 7 o'clock or 7:30 at night, in order for you to have ice cream, you have to put your shoes and your jacket on. You have to grab your keys and your wallet. You have to get in your car. You have to drive to the store and you get it, right? Are you getting, most of the time, are you actually going to go do that to get the ice cream? No. And so if you don't have the stuff in the house that you know you don't want to or shouldn't be eating, then you're less likely to eat it. If you're less likely to eat it, then we're going to minimize some of the toxins. Don't drink your calories. I don't know if you've ever done some of the different coffee shops when you start looking at their super different blended sugary drinks and you start actually adding up the amount of calories that those things have. Some of those drinks, especially if you get like the large 20, 24 ounce ones, they have as many calories in that one drink as an adult male needs for an entire day. It's a lot of calories, right? Not to mention that sugar increases inflammation in the body and also leads you down the road towards heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. So again, choices we make today, although may not have an impact at this moment, long-term could be a big deal. I mean, think about it. If we ate a donut and we immediately gained 2 pounds, how many donuts are we eating? Like none. 5 from the back row. Thank you. But the point is that because we don't have an immediate consequence, we go, well, I've got time. Well, we just talked about how every holiday season we gain 1 to 2 pounds, and then we keep that. So, yes, we have time, but if we keep adding as time goes on, we're not going to necessarily do real well. And again, fill yourself with healthy foods. Well, don't white flour, white sugar, white bread. You get the idea. The more whole grain, whole foods, healthy things are the better for you. And when I talk about healthy foods, it's kind of actually mislabeling, right? So when you go to the grocery store, if you have a health food section, what do you think the rest of the store has then? Junk, right? If this is the only place that they have the healthy foods, then the rest of it has to be the junk foods. Now I like to make it simpler. We either have food or we have junk. You guys are a little bit flat tonight. I mean, we're halfway through this, and I guess maybe you're just so riveted to everything that the other thing too is, what do we eat? So you can have as many vegetables as you want. Now, sometimes that's a hard sell for some of my patients of all ages. You'd think it'd be the kids, but some of the people I have the hardest time talking about vegetables are to the older crowd. So I'm not going to make any judgment, but just saying, eat more vegetables. Also eat meats that have a lot of, eat clean meats. I have the word lean meats. That's also true, but I like the word clean meats. Meats that don't have antibiotics and hormones or other chemicals added to them. So when we talk about meats, for example, if you eat beef, grass finished, hormone-free, antibiotic-free. If you have poultry, you don't want just cage-free, but you really want pastured, so they have as much room to roam, live a healthy, normal life for a chicken, as an example, right? It's interesting, like for salmon, if you compare farm salmon versus wild caught salmon, they actually have to inject the farm salmon in many cases with a dye to make it look similar, although never the same, as the wild caught salmon. And if you think about what the wild caught salmon eat, it's eating normal food from its environment, where they're actually feeding them like a goldfish, throwing stuff in the farm. It's perhaps a cheaper form of getting the salmon, but the quality of the fish is not as good as the wild caught. So I always encourage you, try to get the wild caught stuff. Fruits, nuts, seeds, and then again, stay away from the refined carbs and sugars and that kind of stuff. The other thing that we need to consider too when we talk about nutrition is that sometimes even the best foods in the world, it's hard to get all the nutrients that we need. Now, we have a number of things on the shelves, and whether you get in here or not, that's up to you. I picked the ones that we do have here because the quality is a very high quality. But to me, there's a key three things or core three things that people really need to have, and that's the vitamin D, a multivitamin, and fish oil. Those are the basic things that everybody needs, because we just don't get enough of the omega fatty acids. We're in Oregon, so we need the vitamin D. It decreases your risks of many types of cancers if you have a high enough D level. They call it the sunshine hormone, right? But if you haven't realized, we're in the middle of winter in Oregon. We don't get a lot of sunshine. But even in the middle of the summertime, because we're so far north of the equator, we don't tend to get enough of the sunlight that we're supposed to in the summertime as well. So vitamin D is an important thing. And then a multivitamin is just a good cover the bases. Now, if we want to look at that next level, things like a B complex and vitamin C and probiotics are also healthy. If you want more information about that, we can, maybe I'll do a nutrition 101 class down the road in a few months. But just people always ask, what are the things that we should look at? There's kind of the basics to begin with. Trauma. When we talk about stresses on the body, this tends to be the one that people understand the most, right? And we think of things like car accidents or slip and falls, or even things like sports injuries and whatnot. Some sort of major thing that happens. And when we sit down and we go have a discussion with patients about, okay, so what brings you here, and then talk to me about your past, most people had some sort of bicycle crash as they're learning to ride, or rough house with friends or siblings and fell off a bunk bed or out of a tree. And so we start adding up all these things. But here's what's interesting. These are the obvious physical stressors to the body, but unfortunately, they're not always the ones that cause the most damage. But now to understand this, we need to kind of take a step back. So if we understand that when we have trauma to the body, it's actually going to affect the body. Now we talked about the spinal column and the skull as that shield or suit of armor that protects and houses the brain and the spinal cord. So when we have that trauma, that fall, we can be causing a jarring to the body that can affect then the way the nerves work. And so if we remember, health is normal, but having this trauma then can cause the body and the nervous system not to function properly, setting us up for lack of health. Now, what we tend to do is that I have a number of patients that get in a car accident, and they say, well, I was fine. And I ask them, how did you determine that you're fine? They say, well, I had some low back pain or I had a headache for a day or two, and then it went away. So we call that headache or low back pain a body signal, right? So what do we just say about body signals? Is that the cause or just a symptom or an indicator that something may not be right? And so really evaluating the overall function of the spine is a critical component to be evaluating to see how much damage the body's had under some sort of a trauma. So for those of you that are patients, we've talked about this condition called subluxation. So when we have a trauma, we start having the body the joints don't move very well. We start getting some damage to the tissues. The muscles start going into spasm, aggravates the nerves of the body, which then interferes with that communication. The body then starts to sense that problems, so the joints stop moving very well. Well, the more lack of motion we have, the more stress the body is under, the stress hormones that we just talked about. And we also start to see physiological changes that affecting the joints of the spine, but also the discs. So we start setting ourselves up for degenerative disc disease and osteoarthritis. But all that's creating the same stress response we just talked about a moment ago. So we're having the same cascade of problems going on as a result of a fall or a car accident. So we talk about this nerve interference as a subluxation. And ultimately, the brain has the knowledge to run and control every single part of the body. And the brain communicates down our spinal cord, across the nerves out to the body does its thing, then communicates back across those nerves up the spinal cord of the brain. So as long as we have that loop of communication, our body should be able to express health. But if we've got some sort of irritation or functional challenges to the spine, we don't have that communication going really well, which makes it difficult then to be able to express health or to be able to maintain our health for the long haul. This look familiar? Anybody you know? Maybe in a mirror when you get home? But here's the thing. When we talk about trauma, the macro trauma, that takes up about 5% of our life experiences. So think about that. If 5% is a macro trauma, that means the other 95% of the physical traumas to our body are what we call a micro trauma. I don't know about your holiday dinners, but everybody always has their phone and is checking on something. It's the weather, it's the connecting flight on their way home on Tuesday, or texting the person across the table. Can you believe she said that? Whatever it is, right? But we're just so stuck on our phones. Or with COVID, right? We're all in our homes on our laptops, or sitting with it on our desks, on our laps as we're trying to write stuff, with the rest of our notes and stuff on our desk chair or our kitchen table. It's not good for us. In fact, we're hearing a lot now, you may have heard this yourself, smoking is now the new sitting, right? Smoking is bad. Well, now, all this time we spend sitting puts the spine, in many cases, you see how slouchy she is, puts the spine in abnormal stress positions. We have our heads in upper positions, so we're altering the posture, so we're affecting how our bodies function and work, but we're also not moving, we're not exercising. And pick on the phones one more time, but check this out. So we have our normal healthy head over our shoulders. But as it starts to shift forward, we put this head, which normally weighs anywhere from 10 to 12 pounds, starts to become heavier perception-wise. So as it's out here, right, it's almost like the body's having to hold up a 40-pound head based on how far, or 49 pounds, based on how far forward it is. If you want to try this at home, get a bowling ball or a big watermelon, hold it here. You can hold it for a long period of time. You take that same watermelon or bowling ball and hold it out here, same weight, but it's harder to do, right? Because we're putting a bigger strain on those muscles. Well, Imagine the small muscles in our neck holding up her head, now having to hold her head up here. Right? To go back to this last picture, right? How do you think those muscles are doing as she's hunched over looking at the phone? Or worse yet, all these people. At least for the last gal, she's got the phone up a little bit higher, right? Even though she's stressing out the low back. But all have their heads down. When you put stress on the body, it's going to affect the nerves. Now, I'm oversimplifying this, right? But brain's trying to communicate through the nerves down the spinal cord, and as they come out from between the vertebra, it's like these little switches on a circuit breaker. Well, if we have subluxation and nerve interference, it's not necessarily turning it off, but it's definitely affecting the function at that particular level. Well, if that's the level that controls your stomach, you get indigestion, heart disease. Or if we start having issues in the low back, it could affect the strength of our legs or our elimination process, right? And we can go down the whole list, but the bottom line is if the brain and the body can't communicate because of stress in the spine, that becomes a problem. So how do we know if we have subluxation? Well, in our office, when we do evaluations, we look at a number of different things. What's your posture like? How does your body move? How is the alignment of the joints when you're not moving? We actually use very specific computerized evaluations to check the muscle tone of the body. We even use x-rays in many cases. All this then helps us to know how the body is actually working. But here's the thing, knowing what's going on is helpful, but if we don't do anything about it, that can be a problem. So once we find out what's going on in the spine, what we do in our office is we make very specific spinal corrections to really help restore as much function to the body. And then, of course, you all know you have specific exercises and things that you do both in the office to prepare yourself for the adjustment, but also at home to support the process, which helps people get better faster and stay better longer. So the bottom line of all this is that for those of you that are not under care in a chiropractic office, or your family's not, or your neighbor's not, get them checked. Talk to the team later on the way home, or when we're done tonight, about how we can offer them an opportunity to come and get checked. But the key is that you can't just put it off. The things tend to get better or worse as time goes on if we don't put any effort into it. Worse. And so we don't want that to be you. And so again, talk to the ladies at the front desk, and we talk about how we can help them with that. So I'm done. It's crazy. It's like normally, quick question.
No, it's not a question. I just want to share, if anybody has not signed up here, I am pain-free, and I never believed in my life I could be pain-free. And with Dr. Dan, I am pain-free, and that is my testimony. And I've been through a year of physical therapy twice a week forever and ever and ever, and all the acupuncture you could think of in the world. And I came to Dr. Dan, and I am pain-free.
May I just ask a question, knowing the answer, but how long did you suffer before you came here?
Oh, geez, it was a year. And I have a lot, I should share. I'm a nurse. I had an old back injury 30 years ago. My baby's 31, so it was over 30 years ago. And I saved a patient from falling out of his wheelchair, which I would never do again. I'd let him fall. I'm sorry, I wouldn't. But that started it. And then I had a herniated disc in my back. I got through that with a different chiropractor many, many years ago. And then I really actually was good for about 25 years, but I weighed a lot less than I was a lot younger then too. But the last few years, I don't know, last 4 or 5 years, I was in misery trying to get out of this cycle of pain. I am out of the cycle of pain.
Wonderful.
So I just had to share that because I honestly did not believe. I honestly was starting to think, and I've never had surgery. Thank God I've never had surgery. I will say my sister, 13 years younger than me, has been through 5 back surgeries. Don't want to go there. Our oldest son has been through 3 back surgeries. I'm trying to get him to come here. So that's not what I wanted to do for my body, to go to surgery. I'm not a surgery girl in general. But this is what everything Dr. Dan just said, I can relate because it worked for me. But I could be way better about my diet. I know that. I know that.
We're not asking for perfection, right? I mean,
I know.
I'll be the first one to tell you, I don't eat perfect.
I know.
But if we have the tools and we try to apply and use them as much as possible, or to apply them as much as possible, that's the goal. Let's make some simple changes.
Right.
So I'll hang around and answer a few more questions. We're going to let the rest of the world go away. So thank you all for tuning in. If this didn't work on YouTube and Facebook, we'll try to get the recording up there within the next day or so. And with that, I'm waiting for a thumbs down that we're